Hello and welcome to the very first episode of About Abortion. I'm joined today by my friend and colleague, Christian Hacking, and we're going to be talking about what abortion actually is. Hacking, welcome onto this, the first podcast of the season. Thanks for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here, Dave.
It's great to have any excuse to have you come up to
it's great. It's great to have an excuse to go on the, A12, A148. And a bit weird because obviously we've spent the whole morning together, But now, this is official.
This is what you came for.
Yeah.
This is what you came for.
The red button has been pressed.
Yeah. And this is our very first proper episode of the series. So we had a little intro last week, but today's the first full episode, and we're looking at the question, what is abortion? Now, is that too stupid a question to be asking? Doesn't everyone know what abortion is?
No, it's not a stupid question at all. Well, obviously, because if you actually go out onto the street and ask people what is an abortion, you'll see a myriad of different opinions.
And it's funny you should say that.
Well, it is,
isn't it? Yeah. It is
because we were just out.
That's what we were doing for the last hour.
Yes. Well, it goes to show proof in the pudding.
Well, this is it. So
proof in the public.
So some of the responses we got out there, and hopefully people listening to this would have picked up some of them. But what struck you about the responses we got out there? And we were just asking people, what is abortion? We weren't asking people, are you in favour? Do you think it should be legal? Just what is it?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's just absolutely no consensus and no clarity as to exactly what an abortion is. And what's really funny is obviously when we ask about football or shopping or cooking, like people had a kind of quick knee-jerk response, but like you could tell when it got to the abortion question, like people were like, they started trying to formulate their answers, trying to work out what is that, and you can tell in that exact moment it's like there's something they're guarding, and they've got to kind of go into kind of political kind of press release mode. What is how can I describe this in a way without conceding anything? So we had a variety. I mean, some honest answers, more honest answers, but others just like scientifically inaccurate and off.
Yeah, and what we had from some in particular, they went straight for the politics, didn't they? So someone said, well, it's a woman's right to choose. It should always be so.
Yeah.
So
I thought that was slightly unfair, especially if they're talking to an alien.
Well, yeah, this was the thought experiment. How would you define things to an alien? That's right.
So to come in with, it's a fundamental human right,
could be a bit offensive to a non-human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's just kind of not really getting on their level.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I don't think we put enough thought into how aliens would feel about that that survey. But what was interesting was it was straight into politics, rights, opinions, and I think that's what we find with abortion. It's such an emotive issue. People go straight onto the defence, or they go on to asserting whether it's right or even it's wrong. But what gets lost in all of that is what it even is in the first place. Now, what would you say was the most inaccurate definition you heard today on the streets of what abortion was, or what have you heard elsewhere?
Gosh,
what sort of things mask the truth?
Well, I mean, it may be helpful at this point just to share some of my story, because my mum. Well, here's a question, a riddle. My mum has knocked out over 10,000 people during her career. What is she?
Well, I know the answer to that question. But if I didn't, and even if I had met her, I would say kickboxer.
Not a boxer?
No, kickboxer.
You think kickboxers knock out more people?
I think your mum would knock out more people as a kickboxer than a boxer.
Yeah, people that don't know my mum, she's very wiry.
Yeah, but also quite small. Yeah.
Chokeholds.
Yeah.
Mainly.
I think it's that unforeseen left heel. Yeah.
I would do more cage fighting. Personally. Anyway, let's put
people out of their misery.
Yeah, that was a really stupid question to ask somebody who actually knows your family context. But yeah, my mum's an anaesthetist, and she was an anaesthetist for 53 years and a consultant anaesthetist for I think 37 years, like at Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital. Right, so I mean, very medical background.
Mm-hmm.
And growing up, like we used to operate for everything, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Child had a common cold, operate.
Yeah.
You know, I had like 4 operations.
Yeah.
Like some.
Just to clarify, this is unofficial operations in your home
No.
with anaesthetic.
No, this is official NHS operations.
Okay.
Managed. Like my mum can't do it on me for various rules, but she arranged it. But the main point is, you know, my upbringing was full of medical speech, and it was common. Like my mum would often say to us growing up that, you know, if we had Down syndrome, for example, that we would have got aborted, or terminated, and this produced absolutely no emotional response in me growing up because, as far as I'm concerned, it was just another medical procedure.
Yeah,
it was just like you go into the hospital, you know, the pregnancy is removed by light suction. I think that's like almost an exact quote from the British Pregnancy Advisory Service website. You know, jobs are good. You know, that made total sense. So I think for me, you know, these phrases, these euphemisms like the termination of pregnancy, or, you know, the ending of a pregnancy, or, you know, maybe the sucking up of pregnancy tissue or pregnancy cells, you know, whatever it was, I just totally accepted that as being normal. It was literally only when I saw what an abortion was from a flyer that a mate had actually collected whilst visiting a friend in London and brought back to Leeds where I was at university, that I was like, whoa, like reality check, like cognitive dissonance, like what is that, you know? Because it was an image of a baby on a glove, you know, without a head, you know, and I was like, like my mind was desperately trying to like catch up, like that is not that's a person, you know. And so I think for me the euphemism is the kind of termination of pregnancy, because that was just such a common phrase to me growing up and meant so little, and then when I saw what it looked like, I was like, boom. Never been the same again.
Yeah, because I think that's what we heard, wasn't it? Probably one of the most common responses we heard on the streets today was termination of pregnancy, or ending the pregnancy, or making it so that there's not going to be a baby. I suppose by analogy, if we were to describe, you know, atrocities that have taken place throughout human history, you know, if we were talking about, for example, what was called mercy killing, the euthanasia project, Action T4 in Germany, Nazi Germany, would we call that terminating disability? We're just going to remove disability. Well, no, you're not removing disability. You're killing children who have disabilities. Or, you know, if we were to kill off old people, would we call that terminating old age? No, we're killing people who are old. And so when it comes to the unborn child, this idea we're stopping a pregnancy or terminating, it sounds like we're just cancelling an order. But actually, as you say, when you see the pictures, you see what it really is. The other response that struck me on the streets today, and this, at least a couple of people said this, was they said it's removing a cell.
Yes.
A cell. Now talk to us about that.
Well, again, so I mean, I don't really know where to start. Obviously, at the moment of fertilization, you know, you get a distinct living and whole new individual comes into existence, and for a moment, they are a single cell. Okay, but that's that's the combining of mother's and father's DNA. It is a unique entity, and you can even see a kind of flash of light if you know, calcium ions being kind of exploding across the cell, kind of to mark this moment. It's phenomenal stuff. But when people say that on the streets, I don't think they realise in that moment that most women don't realise that they're pregnant until 4 or 6 weeks. At which point you're not dealing with a single cell. You are dealing with hundreds of thousands of cells that are rapidly specializing into different tissues and organs and systems. So again, it's this kind of, you know, it's a twofold deceiver, that response, because on the one hand it's deceiving you in the assumption that, okay, one cell isn't a human being, and then it's also deceiving you that the standard abortion procedure, which is a medical abortion before 10 weeks in the UK, normally between 6 and 10 weeks, is a single cell by that point, which it's clearly not. You know? And you can see these, you know, you can go online. What's so peculiar in my mind is if you go onto, you know, the NHS website, okay, if you go on the Start for Life NHS website, which is all like pro, parenting and neonatal stuff, like you can see these cartoons and development descriptions going right back to the early days, and it describes it as a runner bean and then the size of a strawberry, and it goes on and on. And you can literally then, if you take a different route on the NHS website, it's all like cloaked in euphemisms, termination of pregnancy, you may not want to continue with your pregnancy, pregnancy risks, and then it sends you off to BPAS or Mary Stopes, the two largest abortion providers. So it's like this total schizophrenia, and just deceptive information that's just out there,
It's like two different worlds, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's really helpful what you said about two levels of deception. Abortion, as practiced by the NHS, BPAS, MSI in this country, is never performed on one cell.
No.
It's way further down the line. But even if it were one cell, or even if, another thing we heard today was, well, it's removing cells. It's a bunch of cells. There's this reductionist language, this dehumanizing language. Oh, it's just a bunch of cells. Again, I'm a bunch of cells. You're a bunch of cells. But are we just a bunch of cells?
Yeah.
And we're going to pick that up in another episode and talk about actually what makes human beings valuable, that we're not just bunches of cells, even if we're very sophisticated, even grown up, fully mature bunches of cells. There's more to us than that, and there's more to us. There was more to us when we were in the womb at just 8, 9, 10 weeks.
And I was actually literally thinking about this just yesterday, right? Because my kids have got to the stage where they're very good at pointing out the moon, right? Even if it's like in the afternoon, it's like moon's there. And at the moment of like whilst we're recording, it's like a half moon at the moment. And I suddenly realised that because one of these arguments, it isn't just that they're basing it on a single cell, but it's kind of like a size-based argument. It's like if you're small enough, you must be insignificant enough to be like squished or got rid of or killed, etc. And what I suddenly realised yesterday, like looking at the moon, is like if I was like a super giant, and there was astronauts on the moon, right? I could get my finger and just like squish them. Yeah. And I'd be like, big deal. Yeah. It's just. Yeah. It's like, it means nothing to me. I can't even see it. Yeah. Yeah. But then obviously, if you zoom in, it's like absolute chaos, on NASA Moon Station 3. Because this ginormous mass has blasted in, everything's been destroyed, human beings are like, it's like there's this total, it's inbuilt, these kind of arguments that like, it's things that are small don't matter, things that are less developed don't matter, things that are in a simple form don't matter, things that are far away don't matter. But if we dare to like zoom in, on your Google map, and there isn't really Google, I think there is Google Moon. Is there Google Moon? But point is, if you scroll in, it's like, no, that's not just, that's really complicated, that's really sophisticated. What's going on in that little cell or bunch of cells, even morning after pill, you're probably dealing with at least a 16 or 32 cell human being. It's like, there's a phenomenal thing going on there that, is so much more than just a cell. And it shows how insane and wanting this self-centered, man-centered, relativist sort of approach to morality is. Just because I happen to be bigger, well, it's relative. What about someone who's bigger than you? Are they more valuable than you are? And so the way in which human beings have justified inhumanity has been to say, well, that they're different from me. They're not really human beings like I am. I think it was Abraham Lincoln who said something along the lines of, okay, so you think that the African American, the African man or woman is different from you because of their skin color. Fine, you say that by their skin color they're less valuable, and you have a right to make them a slave. Well, be careful, because by that standard, you're a slave to the first person who comes along with even paler skin than yours is. It's just doesn't. And this is why it's so important, and we're going to be doing this in this season, this series of podcasts. We've got to trace everything back to the Creator. There has to be an ultimate authority. Otherwise, we're all just making it up as we go along. If I happen to be bigger, stronger, more sophisticated, whatever it is,
well, I thereby justify doing whatever I want, whatever I can get away with.
Well, it's interesting. I've actually seen those words. They are written on the wall in is it the Cenotaph or one of those white buildings in Washington?
Right.
Like, you can actually see them
Right.
imprinted, chiseled into that wall,
Right.
which raises the question, which is not just a moral question, it's a societal question, which is how do you, what laws do you put in place in a healthy society to nurture that society? And obviously a subjective law that says, well, you're smaller, I can do what I want with you, clearly falls apart when a bigger person comes along.
And we're gonna hit on that in this season, looking at morality and legislating morality. A lot of Christians out there would say, "Hang on, don't want to legislate morality."
Personally, I don't like it with morality and legislation in the same sentence.
I
get very uncomfortable. I get the shivers.
But we're going to be talking about that, and the American Constitution is an interesting one because they expressly acknowledge the Creator as the source of, for example, human dignity. Other human rights conventions and so on kind of assume that, and that they're built on that foundation, whether they acknowledge it or not. But the human dignity, this idea that everyone is intrinsically valuable, is not something that's universally held. It's not intuitive. It's actually unique to the Judeo-Christian worldview. But we'll rein ourselves in on that because we need to make sure we don't rush ahead. We need to talk about what abortion actually is physically before we go on to the rest. Because a lot of people, even Christians, a lot of people say, they may well say, well, yeah, I don't agree with abortion, I'm a Christian, it's abortion isn't right. But they still have no idea what it actually is. You and I were on a similar journey. This is almost 10 years ago now, when, certainly for me, one of the big light bulb moments for me, because I put myself in that camp. I grew up in a Christian home, in a church, was always pro-life.
You actually grew up in the church?
Yeah, literally.
Wow.
Yeah, we just
was in your home was a church, or you grew up in the Baptist building?
Yeah. Baptist church had a very strong sense of membership. So I just wanted to show I was really committed.
It was the kind of locked door model.
Yeah. Exactly. So when Els went home,
honestly, if we'd done the locked door model since the 60s, like the fallout in church attendance would be way down.
It's a great way of retaining members. You just don't let them out. So that's where I grew up, and we, always default pro-life. If you'd asked me, is abortion right or wrong, I'd have said wrong, but I had no idea what it was. And I know for you, it was seeing that picture. For me, definitely getting to know some of the facts and seeing the pictures just brought it to light, because you can believe something's wrong, but have no idea what's really going on there. And probably the most accurate definitions we heard today were that it is killing. Some people say that upright, didn't they? They said it is killing.
Yeah,
it's killing. But talk us through what actually happens in an abortion. Okay, what takes place? Paint the picture for us.
So you want me to describe it before I define it, or define it then describe it?
Why don't you describe it for us first, and then we'll see what definition fits that.
Okay, so there's separated. There's two main abortion procedures that take place in the UK as we speak. Okay, the first abortion procedure is a medical abortion, and these have been rolled out since the 80s, and they've increased. So now the majority of abortions are medical abortions in this country. And that involves a woman knowing that she's pregnant, right? Knowing that there's a baby growing inside of her, that for whatever reason, she doesn't want that baby, or she feels like she can't support that baby, or she's waiting for the boyfriend to come and give it support, but he's not. As we say in this work, we don't judge the women who've had abortions. We see them as actually the second victims of the abortion industry. And so what she'll do nowadays, 2022, is she'll probably call up the abortion provider. The abortion provider will book her in for a telephone appointment. She'll go through an appointment which will take between half an hour, 40 minutes. They'll ask her some medical questions, a few questions about her context. She won't have to give an NHS number. She won't necessarily even have to give her real name. She doesn't even need to let her GP know. And then pills will arrive at her door. Okay, and the pills will be two sets of pills. Right, the first pill is called mifepristone, okay, and this is basically a hormone blocker. So you take the pill and it stops, it blocks an essential hormone that your baby needs to survive in the womb. So it basically cuts off the baby's nutrients, and then the baby will die, basically suffocate to death in the womb, although that it can actually be reversed, right? So if a woman's in that position, she can have a large dose of progesterone given by a sympathetic GP, and that can actually, about 50% of the time, it can reverse the effects of that hormone inhibitor. She's then asked to wait about 24 hours or 48 hours, and she then takes a second pill called misoprostol. Okay, and this pill was initially designed for stomach ulcers, right? But they just noticed that it had this side effect, which was it kind of induced labour contractions. It produced an early labour, and so what women will do at 10 weeks, far before the time that the baby is viable outside the womb, they'll just take this pill and they will start. Initially with sweats, diarrhea, vomiting, but will eventually lead to them actually just having an early labour, and they will eject their child into their own home, either down the toilet or onto the bed sheets, and then they would be left to discard that child at home. So that's the medical abortion procedure that happens in the UK. That it's meant to only take place at home up to 10 weeks, although we do know of stories of women doing it way beyond that point. Then you've got the surgical abortion procedure, okay? And so if a woman gets beyond kind of 12, 13 weeks, the baby's now developing so quickly, its bone structure's in place and its skeletal structure's calcifying, so you can't birth it as easily at this stage. So what you would do is you would go for a surgical procedure in which a woman would often attend the abortion clinic. I'll skip over a number of the steps just to simplify things, but she will basically have a surgical procedure under sedation or being knocked out entirely, and a suction device about 10 times more powerful than your conventional household Hoover will suck the baby up, and it's so powerful it pulls the whole baby's flesh, bones through into a suction device.
That's first trimester, isn't it? The suction.
Yeah, that would be first trimester. Yeah. But obviously, as the baby grows and continues to grow into the second or third trimester, and sadly third trimester abortions do still happen in the UK, you've got to do more kind of dismembering, decapitating, pulling the child apart, crushing the skull, which is the main, the largest part of the child at this stage, in order to pull it through the cervix of the mother. So these are large, proper operations. The mother will come in normally quite early in the morning to the abortion clinic. She'll be prepared, to widen the entrance to her cervix, and then they'll kill and pull the baby apart beforehand. Sometimes they may, although this is rare, they may inject the child with a poisonous substance called potassium chloride to stop the child's heart before they do this, but there's no evidence to suggest that they do this in the majority of cases. So, and then you've got third trimester abortion. So last year in the UK, over 509 babies were recorded to have been intentionally killed in the womb past 22 weeks in the United Kingdom. And that's 22 weeks. So that's when babies have, I think it's a 1 in 4 chance of surviving outside the womb with help at that stage. So and at that stage they're either killed and delivered whole, or they're dismantled in the womb and pulled out.
But by the time they're bigger, we're talking injection to the heart, delivery.
Yes. So injection into the heart to kill the child, to stop its heartbeat, and then deliver. And the substance that they use is it's quite a controversial one, because it's the same substance that they use to put animals down. And there's actually quite a lot of debate going on as to whether it's humane to do it for animals because of the excruciating pain that it's known to cause before death. So the whole thing is just incredibly inhumane and barbaric, and
there are some major animal rights veterinary associations that actually say you cannot use potassium chloride on an animal unless they're anaesthetised first.
Interesting.
And they don't use it on criminals on death row in the States unless they're anaesthetised first. So this thing is incredibly painful. And we know that babies feel pain. in the womb, because they will anaesthetise for in utero surgery, won't they? 22 weeks, spina bifida, happens here in the UK. So this idea of injection to the heart, they'll use, again, euphemisms, won't they? It's an intracardiac injection.
Yes.
To cause fetal demise.
Yes.
Unless you're really switched on, you're not going to hear what's going on there. But what we're talking in plain English is a lethal injection to the heart. One thing you mentioned there was interesting. You talked about how that first trimester abortion is well before viability. And often people use that as an argument for abortion, don't they? Well, look, it's not viable yet. But actually, let's flip this around, because in what world is it okay to thrust a child into an environment that it cannot survive in? Like a toddler who can't swim is not viable in a swimming pool. Do I use that as justification for putting the toddler in the swimming pool? Well, it's not viable outside the swimming pool or inside the swimming pool, so why should I look after it?
Well,
it doesn't make sense.
Well, by the pro-abortion argument, it wasn't a child that you threw in, because if it was a child, then it would be able to survive in the environment. Do you see? It's like, does that make sense?
It's kind of it's begging the question, isn't it? It's saying, well, we have decided that if it cannot survive what we're about to do to it, it doesn't deserve to survive
it's not a human being,
where it is,
which is like crazy reckless.
Which is where it's meant to be.
The
womb is the right place for that stage of development until term. And yet we use that, we justify pulling a person, not something, someone, out of their natural environment because they can't survive in that environment we're thrusting them into. And yet we're so used to these assertions, we let them just flow over us. Well, they're not viable. Oh no, fair enough. They're not viable.
But also, I mean, I'm spinally injured, and so I had the privilege of spending time in 2 spinal units in the UK, both in Pinderfields in Yorkshire and then in Stoke Mandeville. And what was so interesting about being in these places is that I had a number of friends who were vented, right? So they basically had a machine that breathed for them because their spinal injury was so high up their neck that they couldn't breathe. Right? And one of them was called Sean. I think he was a mega brain. He's gone back to Ireland. He's been studying some degree in space science or something like that. But again, it was like the viability argument. He wasn't naturally viable. If I literally unplugged his device, he would die. Yet his mum and the support, the hospital, we're doing all we can, because we acknowledge that he wasn't just a brain, on the top of a body, but he was actually a person. That we need to dignify. So again, it's like, it's that schizophrenia, totally at play again. That just needs to be ironed out. And where does it? Purpose of this podcast. How do you iron it out? Well, you've got to start with definitions.
That's right. And we've got to feel the discomfort, the dissonance that's actually baked into our system at the moment. Where in the NHS, you can spend, I think it's certainly thousands of pounds a week. Keeping a premature baby alive, and the NHS will spend tens of thousands a year on an individual patient who's got special needs year on year, and yet on the other side we're paying money to kill babies in the womb, disabled or not. And that's interesting, because this is the dilapidation of a sort of post-Christian culture where we've got some beautiful things still hanging on, care for the disabled, etc. But this very ugly root is growing of utter scorn for the most vulnerable. But at the moment we kind of got both going on at the same time.
And added to that, is just the actual consequence of abortion on the mother's health, right? So it's known that abortion leads to future preterm delivery, which means you're going to end up having a child in one of these skibboos being looked after at a huge expense. We know that it, is linked with placenta pravia. There's very reputable international studies on the links between abortion and breast cancer, which you're not allowed to talk about, because it's like this is how I just got your podcast cancelled from Spotify.
That's it. First episode. We're finished.
But this again, it's so short term. It's like, kill this child now, and everything, your life's going to get back on track. No, that's not how killing people works. If you kill someone, there's huge things around that's it's gonna affect the whole direction of your life, and it's probably in the long term not gonna free you up.
That's right.
It's actually probably going to weigh you down in the morality of it, in the health of it, in the social impact of it. So it's like got to be addressed.
And that's another thing we're going to be looking at in this podcast is, I love the way John Piper put this in one of his sermons. As it happens, it was about abortion, but it applies to so much. Doing the right thing will never ruin your life. It might be hard.
Can you do it in a John Piper voice? I feel like that'd be more impactful.
I think it will lose the one remaining follower that we still have.
The one person who followed us off Spotify.
I'm clinging on. I'm clinging on to that one. But he says, or as others have said, the right thing is the right thing, even if everyone says it's wrong. And again, this is where we need to have a morality that's actually got foundations. We've got to come back to Scripture. We've got to come back to what God says is right, because we've got this twisted sort of counterfeit version of what we might call morality, where we justify things according to the situation. We talk about the greater good. We talk about, maybe it's not right generally, but what if I don't? And we make it very messy, very complicated. And it's no surprise that we see negative consequence after negative consequence, and abortion just creates this terrible chain of destruction. And we're going to look at that as well. But the other thing I wanted to pick up before I forget on what you said was that midterm abortion, these metal tools used to crush the skull of a baby, to cut them with a sharp curette, to decapitate, to dismember, and to put out these bits. And they'll lay them out on the table to make sure all the bits are there, because if there's something still in there, it could cause infection. I'll never forget when it was only 3 or 4 years ago, I went to an exhibition and someone had brought a briefcase of abortion tools. This is actually from Europe, from the continent. I think it's from the Netherlands. And they opened up, and it's very chilling to see this, because what you saw here, it's akin to. I've never been to Auschwitz. I think you have.
No, I haven't.
You didn't go. Okay, so
I want to at some point.
Yeah. So I've never been, but I can imagine if you actually step into where this stuff happened, you see where the gas came out of pipes, and where the Jews were left to kind of, press the button on their own death. I can imagine seeing that being very chilling. It just brings it home in a whole new way. Now, when this briefcase opened and I saw these tools, the thing that really struck me about them was the weight. There was this kind of, it was like a tongs you might use to flip a burger on a barbecue. It was like that, but the ends were reinforced with just great clumps of metal. And these great clumps, and it was heavy, and this tool was used to crush the skull of babies. And I just remember thinking, goodness me, like, you know what it's like if you're holding a newborn baby. Everyone says you've got to support the head. You know how tender that head is.
Oh gosh.
And you want to just stroke it, you want to look after it, you make sure the baby's warm, whatever. It's just so tender, and the baby's skin is so soft. And this tool was just so brutal and merciless. But then what occurred to me was, there's no nice way to kill a baby. It's not just this tool that's inhumane because of its weight and the kind of this brutal lump of metal at either side. There's no nice way to kill a baby. The baby, to begin with, is there, it's alive, it's growing, it's being nurtured in that place that God designed as a place of safety. And every abortion ends up with a dead baby. And that baby is generally killed within the womb, and then it's pulled out one way or another. And then it's got to go somewhere. That body doesn't just disappear. So now we come back to what we heard on the streets. It's just removing a cell. Oh, it's just terminating a pregnancy. Utterly deficient. Perhaps, that's what they genuinely believe. Perhaps they just didn't know. But it's utterly deficient when you consider every abortion takes a healthy, sometimes there are health issues, but in 98% of the cases there's no health issue at all. But a living, growing baby, and there's no nice way to kill a baby. and yet we're told it's healthcare. We're told it's just
safe. You know, that's the worst. You know, another just misleading. You know, euphemism dropped into this lethal cocktail that is abortion is. You know, it's a safe, legal procedure.
That's right.
But it's like, firstly, safe for who?
Yeah.
You know, if someone's being poisoned,
yeah.
if someone's having their nutrition denied, if someone's being forced into a situation which they can't survive in, that's like, you know, that is like the antithesis of health and safety.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And even for the mums, we know it's not safe. With these medical abortions, it's the complication rate for medical abortions is 4 times higher than for surgical abortions. Okay, I think that was a Dutch study. I hope your podcast will have some links.
Yeah, we'll get some links.
We'll get some links. You can't have a podcast without links.
We'll have links and a list of corrections for all the stuff you said.
Thank you. And maybe like we can be sponsored by deodorant links.
Nice.
We can have links and links. Nice. It'd be great if they got on board. Because we're making society sweat.
Yes, we are. We're turning up the temperature.
Yeah.
People need a lot more deodorant.
Yeah, I mean, there's a link to be made there. But anyway, it's you know, one in 17 women taking these pills at home, right? They end up having complications. They end up requiring hospital treatment because of incomplete abortion, that the baby hasn't come fully out. Part of the baby's been left inside. Whatever it is, like it's just it's people putting, it's the will, you know, it's our human will, and then justifying, you know.
Yeah.
And it's funny when you said earlier about the whole, I think you talked earlier about kind of slavery or you know, or the T4 program. It's just like in every generation, it's almost like we're dealing right now with the same problem, but just a different generation. It's like we always oppress other people. We always seek to we always seek to exploit and kill lesser human beings, and we've kind of got it under check with disability for now. We've kind of got it under check with racism for now, and enslaving foreign populations. But it's like this is the area where it's just that crooked human desire that God wants to bring under His control is still just like at large. And it's ever finding more creative ways to kill and to mar and to distort and to destroy and to pull people into its dark web. You know. So I've forgotten the general point.
But that's helpful, because, you know, I think sometimes we look back on history, we see a load of injustice, and we kind of have this assumption that we're done with it.
Push past that.
Yeah, we're done with it. So
we've got the Declaration of Human Rights.
That's right, and we're so progressive, and yet the question isn't, are we oppressing a people group today? It's which people group are we oppressing? Because it's happening. It's going to be like the history of humanity shows. This is what we get up to. And this is the blind spot of our day. This is, and later in the series, I'm talking with Camilla Olam, who's written this book, For Those Being Crushed, and the kind of subtitle is something to do with confronting our society's greatest blind spot, and that's what we're seeing here. Now we're going to need to wrap this up. We
need to define it. We haven't actually defined it.
So what is abortion?
So I would say, in light of all that we've been speaking about, the best definition for abortion is the intentional taking of an innocent human being, or abortion is the intentional killing of an innocent human being, right? So it's intentional in the respect that this is not a procedure that needs to be done in order to save the mother's life. Right? It's intentionally just trying to kill. It's intentional not to save life, it's to kill life. It's a human being, because the science is settled on that matter. You're not dealing with a potential person, you are dealing with a person with potential. And it's innocent, you know. Although spiritually none of us are innocent, you know, legally there's no more innocent an entity than an unborn child. You know, they've had no opportunity to, you know, formulate, you know, any, you know, wickedness, you know, kind of verbalize or do anything that is disobedient to law or to parental authority. Like there's just, you know, so it's the intentional killing of an innocent human being. And whilst we heard vague kind of vague iterations of that from some men.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nobody said it so clearly on the
Yeah.
streets today.
Yeah.
And even the men who did say it, you know, we didn't sense from them a real, you know, they went back to their lunch. It's
Yeah.
like there isn't a sense of like that's an issue.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And that's helpful, because what you said there in your definition is, we've talked about what it is, what happens, but when we face that, it comes with moral force, because we're talking about intentionally killing an innocent human being. That ought to grab us morally and say that's not okay, because we live in a moral world. This is God's world. We are moral beings, and it's not just nothing. You know, some people on the streets, well, it's just removing cells, even though they say, well, it's killing a fetus. Well, and let's move on. But actually, no, we can't move on, because intentionally taking an innocent human life is a violation of God's law. And we're going to be able to look at this in later episodes, but you know, we've looked a bit at what happens in an abortion, and we've defined it, which comes with moral force, that we're making a moral implication there. But there's much more that needs to be said, isn't there, about abortion? We're going to look at the scale of abortion, perhaps next week, the week after, just how prevalent this is. But we also we mustn't fall into the trap of being sort of deconstructionist ourselves, you know, and just saying, oh, here's what it is, let's move on. Actually, no. I think I was trying to find earlier today, C.S. Lewis, one of his Narnia stories. He there's a conversation that he narrates, and one of them talks about, the sun, it's just a big old ball of burning gas or whatever.
Yeah.
And the reply is, even in your world, that's not what the sun is. That's just what it's made of.
Yeah.
You know, we can talk about what abortion's made of, what happens in an abortion, but we also need to step back and see what it is socially, historically, spiritually.
Yeah.
We're going to look at abortion as child sacrifice,
Yeah.
what the implications of that are.
Yeah.
We're going to look at it as genocide.
Yeah.
This is not just isolated cases of random killing.
Yeah.
But it was right that we started with what actually happens in abortion, because even where people hear abortion addressed, and that's not often, we're very, and understandably so, we're squeamish. We don't want to look at it because it's so horrific.
Yeah.
But actually, because it's so horrific, we need to look at it.
Yeah.
So thank you, Christian.
Well, I hope you have me back.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
I hope I haven't,
I'll check if that one follower is still standing in a couple of weeks' time, and then I'll let you know. I'll call you. Don't call me. Okay.
That's how it's always worked in our friendship.
Yeah.
So that's understandable. No change there.
Great. Well, let's end there. Thank you, Christian, and we'll have you back on before long next week and the week after. We're looking at the scale of abortion, and we're going to be looking at more of how we're to understand what it is spiritually, morally. Thank you.
Pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us for this week's episode of About Abortion. Next week, I'm inviting Christian back, and we're going to be talking about the scale of abortion.